Go. So, hi again. We're now on what is called the campus of Touro Synagogue. There are three buildings. You're looking at the synagogue, and then behind us is a beautiful visitor center that was put up about 10 years ago, and then a third building. And then they've got this wonderful area out in front here. Touro Synagogue is the oldest synagogue building in existence in the United States. There's another Jewish congregation in New York, but that building, that first synagogue, is no longer standing. So this is very, very historic, and many tourists, Jewish people, non-Jewish people, come here because it's got a wonderful story to tell. When we saw the cemetery a little while ago, we talked about the Sephardic Jews who came here because they were persecuted in European countries, found a refuge here in the state of Rhode Island. Not so fast, it took a little while. They were welcome to stay here, but then rights of citizenship and being able to be accepted in the community took maybe a little bit longer. But eventually, the Jewish people were players and actors in Newport's early colonial history, and you'll learn more about that, I'm sure, in some of your courses. The synagogue itself was designed by an architect, Peter Harrison, who's very well known in Newport circles, sometimes referred to as America's first architect. And it's a wonderful blend of architecture. It's got a lot of Jewish symbolism to it, but it also has a lot of colonial elements to it as well, because Harrison had never been in a synagogue. No one here in Newport had ever been in a synagogue. So they worked from pictures and sketches of synagogues in London and in Amsterdam, and then designed this. It's also famous for a visit from George Washington. When George Washington was president, he came here, as I think I may have mentioned earlier. Thomas Jefferson was his Secretary of State, and he was impressed by the redwood. But Washington received a letter from the warden of this community, and in that letter, Moses Satius, that was the gentleman's name, asked, now that this is a new country, how will Jewish people be treated? Okay, because we know how we've been treated historically in other places, but how will these United States treat Jews? And Washington responded to that letter, and it's a beautiful document. They read it here every summer, once in a very nice ceremony. But he talked about the United States government will give bigotry no sanction and persecution no assistance in terms of religion. And all that it asks from its citizens is to be good and faithful citizens. So it was a very important letter, not just for the Jewish community, but for all religious persuasions, to say there is no litmus test of religion. If you want to be a good citizen in this country, there's room for you if you belong to A, B, C, or none of the above. Okay? So sometime, hopefully, you'll have a chance to come down and visit Touro.
I just want to add a couple of things to what John had to say. When we were up at the cemetery, we were saying that the gates went up in the 1840s. At that point, the synagogue was shut down. So the synagogue shut down in 1822. After the American Revolution, the Jewish community really dispersed out of Newport. And so for 60 years, the synagogue will be closed. And there was actually a job in Newport to be kind of the caretaker for the synagogue. One person was responsible, and one person had the keys. In the 1880s, the Jewish community had come back to Newport. In 1883, the synagogue gets going again. It's an Orthodox synagogue, and as John just said, it's an active synagogue now, and it's open for tours. Or once COVID's over, it'll be open for tours. So you'll have a chance to come and take a look at the oldest synagogue in the United States.
Okay, so I'm back again for one last point, but if you can tell from the way you're looking at the synagogue building, it may look like it's not really positioned properly to face the street, and that's not a mistake by the architect or the engineers. It's intentional because the synagogue is sited so that it faces towards Jerusalem. So people will come by and look at it and say, well, why is it at that strange angle? All the other buildings on Touro Street are butting up in a kind of perpendicular way, parallel to the street. But the synagogue is sited that way intentionally, and when you sit in the synagogue, you face the Torah, and that faces Jerusalem.